Yeah, but that was one of the faster moments, JM, because
Yeah.
typically, you have to put in coal, then you have to heat it, and the steam needs to start turning the gears, and nobody wants
Mm.
to have 2-hour long podcast episodes. I get it.
Roland Volt, our friendly EA automaton. All right. I understand. Your clockwork best practices are coming
I'm
to
guilty.
mind.
I'm guilting for climate change. Welcome to the What's Your Baseline podcast, where we demystify enterprise architecture and business process management.
We're here to bring best practices and lessons learned from our years to your ears, as well as interviewing friends we've met along the way on our professional journeys.
My name is Roland Volt, and I'm joined today by my co-host, James Erlinson. Hey, JM, how are you doing today?
Roland, I'm doing great. It's a perfect time of year for me. I don't love the summer. I mean, it's fun, but it's also really warm, and I'm somebody who kind of gets hot too easily. So as it turns to fall, the temperatures are perfect. And I've been on a number of walks, and I'm just waiting for the leaves to change. How are you doing, Roland?
Well, better. And as you might see in the background of me, that's not an artificial background. It's a new old office that I moved into. So the last
Ooh.
weekend was like having people carrying stuff upstairs, and obviously I hobbled stairs and all that stuff. And JM, that's the new studio that you have to live with now, for the
I'm
foreseeable
excited. I'm
future.
excited. It sounds fine. I expect you probably want to put like some bass traps and stuff like that in there, just so that it doesn't echo quite so much.
Yeah, well, I think
I'm not
it's
one to
better
talk.
than the dungeon that I was sitting in before, and I hope it's a little bit warmer in winter. So we'll see
Well,
how it
you
goes.
deserve the dungeon. That's the difference, Roland. This
Oh,
one, I don't know if it's earned quite yet.
yeah, it's too nice for me. But speaking of cold, and I know that's a very lame bridge that I now do, but we do have a guest today, and that
Yeah.
guest comes from one of the happiest, if not the happiest country in the world, which by coincidence is also cold for quite some time of the year. So without further ado, welcome Eetu Niemi for being the guest on our show and having a conversation with us about lightweight enterprise architecture, which to me sometimes sounds like an oxymoron. But welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we're happy to have you, my friend. And before we get started, we always love to do this section where we have our guests introduce themselves to our audience. So let's first start with your bona fides. What have you done? Tell us a little bit about your career and the influences that brought you to your conclusions and your best practice around lightweight EA.
All right, that's a kind of extensive question. Maybe start from like the roles I have regarding enterprise architecture. Like I think my main job is at CGI, working on enterprise architecture, solution architecture, and business process development, having been doing this for over 15 years now here in Helsinki. And basically, I do hands-on architecture work every day, modeling or developing ways of working, and also a bit of work with tools. Like, for example, I have used most of the tools in the market with which you can do enterprise architecture modeling. And I think the second role is then is my, you could call it a mission even, is to make enterprise architecture practical and accessible and democratize it so that it becomes a shared tool, like not just something that architects do in the so-called ivory tower.
Yeah. And then you also, and I have to show it in the camera, you also put your thoughts on virtual pieces of paper. And that's basically how we met, by being some fellow authors. And I read your book, and I thought that was a good idea to have you on the show. But before we get to that topic, obviously, is talk a little bit about what your key experiences with EA were. Obviously, you mentioned the ivory tower, which is a low hurdle to jump over. But what are other key experiences or key aspects that you see people using EA or doing EA that are not that great? Not great.
Well, we're working a bit around for the organization in different industries. I have seen probably all of the problems that you could have with enterprise
Mhm.
architecture. Like I think the one thing is that you do too much planning and never get to the actual work. Like for example, work on the framework or the processes or whatnot, or fiddling with the tool for 6 months and then everyone is bored already and you never get anything done. Or on the other end of the spectrum is the thing where you try to model everything or try to model it in too much detail. And in my opinion, that's not enterprise architecture anymore. That's something else, like IT architecture or process modeling.
Mhm.
And like I think the most important thing or the thing that often goes wrong is that the architects are not answering the real needs the organization and its management has.
Yeah,
Like
they're busy with
of course,
themselves.
yeah, you have to take the
Yeah.
strategy and the environment and everything and try to solve those problems or issues or challenges with enterprise architecture.
I think that there's a lot of customers that I work with who are like, oh yeah, the end point of this exercise is more models. And I'm like, that's not true. The end point of this exercise is you have a business that runs, like that. You have a transformed architecture landscape. You have best practices you can actually use that change how your business works. Like the end point can't just be making more collateral, because that's not what you're here for, right?
Yeah, that's how it goes. Like for example, if you think about whatever framework like Zahman or even Archimate and try to fill every box in the framework, like that is not the right approach. Like you have to take the real problems and try to answer to them with I would say minimum amount of architecture descriptions. Like that is what I mean by lightweight architecture, but it goes on to the governance side as well, not only on the models.
Yeah, we will discuss it at length in the upcoming 45 minutes. But before we get there, obviously, our audience likes to get to know you on a personal level a little bit better. So can you talk a little bit about what your hobbies are, your bucket list items, your interests?
I think the writing already came out. Like I have written several nonfiction books. I think it all started in 21 when I self-published my first book. Then there was a second one, and then there was the Finnish enterprise architecture book with a Finnish publisher. That is then like the basis for the international edition that is now coming out. But I also write fiction. I like to take part in writing competitions because I want to have goals, ambitious goals in writing as well. And I'm also working on a children's book now. It will come out next year as well as my debut novel. So many kinds of writing.
Yeah, I heard there's other children books coming out soon from a cold place a little bit further west of you, I guess. But I don't want to spoil it.
Things under our hats, as they say, Roland. And that, I think that's a great thing for us to know. And it's really cool that as an author, you've extended yourself past just business focused information, but also to other types of narrative storytelling. I think that's a tool that we lack a lot in business, which is to tell a compelling narrative. Like, people aren't just looking at pictures and understanding them themselves. I think I said that previous episode. I love, like, it doesn't speak for itself. Like, you have to speak for it, and in doing that, the work you do needs to tell a story, and that narrative is how people interpret it, how people use it, ultimately how they decide on it. And I think that's really cool to talk about it, particularly as we go into our topic for today, which is lightweight EA. So first and foremost, Eetu, tell me a little bit more about what enterprise architecture means to you. So let's define some terms. Let's define the scope of what you're looking at when you're thinking about this in a lightweight capacity.
Uh, well, of course, there are plenty of definitions. I have also seen the scientific ones, but in its heart, like the core to me is that it is all about cooperation and communication, where you use architectural descriptions. Like, you of course cannot have enterprise architecture practice without architectural descriptions, but at its heart it is communication and cooperation, where you are trying to create some kind of shared understanding and support decision making.
And just to be very clear, and I know you think that way, but what I see in the past is that people equate EA with IT architecture. And I think that jumps way too short, right? And how do you see on the spectrum of things that an enterprise does, or an organization does, or a collaboration of organizations do? How do you define the term enterprise, and how do you define the term architecture in that context?
Starting from the enterprise, like usually I mean the organization and its immediate environment. Like of course you shouldn't only model the organization itself, but its connections to the
Mhm.
ecosystem, because otherwise it's kind of almost useless on internal things. But about the architecture, like to me, enterprise architecture is quite high level, but still relatively concrete. Because if you make it too abstract, then it doesn't provide any value. But you are basically modeling logical level things. You are not modeling buildings or people or even servers, but logical level things like processes and applications and so on.
Yeah, and you apply that you sort of have to do that right. Otherwise, you could be looking at an exercise that isn't effective. So tell me a little bit more about where you've seen failure, like where what things hold back enterprise architecture as a discipline, or in the way in which people do enterprise architecture.
Like I think what I see most often is that people try to model everything, like this
Mm.
this issue of filling the framework because of filling the framework and not answering the real needs. Like that is the one thing. And the second is maybe that they just want to start from the lowest level possible, like all the little details, and they never arrive at the high level view that management actually is interested in. I think that is a typical issue.
Yeah, because it's easy. People see what they have. They open the
Yeah.
drawer, that they see cables and boxes, and thought, "Oh, that can translate into boxes and arrows." So
Yeah,
I can see that. But the question that I would have is, where would you draw the line? You alluded a little bit about it, but if you would talk it to in artifacts, and I'm thinking about things like a TOGAF or a segment or whatever, right? Um, what would be the level of detail that you would recommend to a listener, where you should start and where you should end?
within enterprise architecture, you should model the named uh, entities like applications and processes, but not model their insights. Like that is then something else. Like if you are modeling the insights of an application, then it is application architecture or IT architecture or technical architecture, whatever you want to call it. And if you do it for the processes, then it is process modeling or process improvement. But on EA, I would keep on the entity level.
So you see a difference between those practices?
Yeah,
Question
yeah.
mark. You see
I
EA more as the layer on top of it, that's the container or whatever, the trigger for all of those other things.
exactly. Like I like to draw a line between EA and the other kind of practices, because otherwise you cannot really improve the practice of EA if you think that it kind of encompasses everything.
That makes sense. And also, I think that if you're claiming ownership over other practices, you're not earning allies, you're earning adversaries. And that's
I think
something that
yeah,
you don't want.
that is even larger problem. Like especially when you go to the management level.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, considering how we address or reconsidering how we address enterprise architecture in an organization, what are some things we need to start thinking about? How do we kick that off right? And what does kicking it off right do for the organization who's trying to use enterprise architecture as a tool for getting a handle on how they would operate the business and improving it to achieve their goals?
Well, as an architect, I like to plan. Like it is good
Oh,
idea to plan a bit, but not too much, and do the planning with the stakeholders like management and whatnot, not alone, and also document what you have planned, and basically go through the framework. I call it framework in my book, that kind of defines these areas that you would need to consider. For example, the purpose of EA in the organization, the scope, the stakeholders, the use contexts where you actually apply it, roles, responsibilities, modeling principles. So I think that is the most important areas to consider. And maybe just don't jot down maybe three or 5 bullet points each. Like you don't need to plan a lot.
And you agree on this as like your method beforehand, right? Like you say, here are all the things we are going to talk about. So that's the planning before the doing, right? And then you lay out the things that fill in each of those categories. I mean, it seems to me like part of this exercise, even before you get started, is convincing people, or at least coming to a consensus about the scope of conversation, because everyone would come to the table with a little bit of a different perspective on EA. Where do you have that conversation about scope? Is that an executive level conversation? Is it like an architect level conversation? Is it somewhere in the middle? Like, where does that happen?
I think it depends a lot who is buying your work as an architect, like whether you are an
Fair. Yeah.
internal employee or consultant. Like if it's a CIO, like then you talk to them. But if it is like technology manager or even like some lower level line manager or whatever, then you start with them and try to get to the executive lounge at some point. But you start with the people who you know. That's how I would do it.
To me, Eetu, that sounds a little bit like, how do I implement EA as a practice in an organization, which obviously is a topic. What were your experiences in getting acceptance for this? Because in my experience, you have those high ambitions. Oh yeah, we need to understand what we're doing and we need to plan and blah, all that type of stuff. But when the rubber hits the road, you run into those roadblocks like, I had no time for this. I need to implement a system, or I'm busy doing other stuff, or my flowers need to be watered. Go away. So you see that resistance that comes up. What are your experiences in that context, or in other words, more professionally? How do you communicate the value that you bring to the table?
Well, I think I have met a lot of challenges in communicating EA. Like sometimes it starts from defining the thing itself, but I try to approach it with concrete examples. Like these are the deliverables we are talking about, like made to look nice and have maybe some added information like heat maps and whatnot, not just boxes on a PowerPoint. And then maybe bring out some ideas how it could help, like whoever is the other person, like to try to answer to their needs.
That makes sense. And the next question I have, though, is you mentioned that we're not just looking to fill out boxes in the framework, but that frameworks can be a useful starting point, at least that I believe that that it can be a useful starting point. So when you're looking to get started with EA, where do you look for good structural practices, good sorts of like predefined methods from which you can build what's tailored to your own needs?
Like I have been doing this work for a while, so I have quite good understanding, like without looking at any framework. But I have to admit that I am a huge fan of Archimate. That I like to use.
Interesting.
Like in every client case almost that I have.
Not to go astray from this, but I have not seen a lot of Archimate in my life. I use it now. I'm confessing. I actually use it just once in the context of a real problem. Right. All the other times I looked it up, it was like, oh yeah, different levels and yeah, boxes, they're similar and all that stuff. But then I moved back to the old stuff, the way that I feel comfortable, the BPMNs and the IE data models and the application landscapes and all that type of stuff. So what is it that makes Archimate, and we should have an episode about that, JM, by the way. What is it that makes Archimate so attractive for you? Why should people care?
It is extensive and just at the right level of detail for enterprise architecture modeling, to my opinion. Like of course it has a lot of content. Like it is very very extensive, but I have a very small subset that I like to use. Like
Mhm.
you shouldn't apply the whole standard, like the whole notation. You wouldn't even usually find use for all of the lines and boxes. I don't remember how many entities and relations I'm using. Yeah, but it is much less. Maybe 10% or 20% of the whole notation.
Which is kind of the idea of a notation, right? It comes out of
Yes.
the gate swinging with comprehensiveness, and then you have to tailor it down to what you're actually going to use.
No,
Yeah, and that's
JM.
something that
No,
I felt
you
with
need
my.
to,
You don't like that?
JM. You need to use every damn single object that's in
Oh boy.
BPMN.
Yeah,
We
no,
just
no,
spent
no.
1.5 hours talking about this. Of course, you need to use the non-interrupting intermediate signal event. And if you
Oh
don't do
boy.
it, you're such an amateur.
But in Archimate, that's the thing, is like that is a pretty big spec, and also the Archimate interchange language slash format is something that I've seen people import and export into tools. So there is some transportability of that information. When you're looking at creating these assets, and particularly for organizations that are younger in their EA, what types of assets, what sort of focus of the assets that you create is there? Like, what are you trying to solve, off the bat, rather than looking at an entire landscape early on?
Like maybe I like to start with at least one diagram type per architecture layer. Maybe not for technology architecture, but from the business and strategy side, I would have capabilities. Or if it
Hmm.
is like long stretch for the organization to embrace capabilities, then I would have like a function map or process
Hmm.
map, and then of course application map. That's a classic, and some kind of data architecture, like list the main business entities and then their relationships. And I'm also a fan of having application architecture with data flows, because they are very useful on the IT side.
Roland, you and I have had a few different conversations about the challenge of convincing organizations that the word capability is what they're really looking for,
Mhm.
rather than rather than application or process. That what they're trying to solve for is how they can actually provide an organizational capability to their stakeholders and to their customers. And yeah, it seems like you're using Archimate as a way of making that good fight come to life, which is cool. And when you're looking at tooling that does that, are you looking to, because today's all about lightweight EA. How do you tool up for an organization to give them the resources that they need to create these sorts of analyses?
I usually want to start light, because that
Mm,
usually makes sense. But of course, it depends on the context. Like sometimes the client already has some kind of tool, and then the consultant, of course, uses that one. But if I can start fresh, then I would start with some very lightweight tool. Like even the free Archie tool is
yeah.
better than
Mhm.
PowerPoint. Like it is very good for modeling the interrelationships between elements, for example, especially when you are using Archimate. And then you can think maybe year later if you would need something that is nicer.
Yeah, better than PowerPoint is it's a unfortunately it's a low bar to clear that people often trip over, which is such a weird thing to talk about. We're gonna coming to a close for the first section. So I want to get a couple of final thoughts. But you talked about the introduction of things and getting quick wins. How do those quick wins present themselves, and how do you make sure that you can actually get those wins quickly?
Well, I think it all starts from the concrete goals and problems that you are trying to solve. Like for example, if it is about some application project coming up, and you need to know the current systems in the relationships, then you just like model those, and then the IT people are hopefully happy. But and on the business side, you then of course have another kind of challenges that you are trying to answer. Like not always successfully, but you can do your best. And then if you are good, and the people like start to see that you are providing added value, then you start to get invitations to these tables where architects don't often get, like all kinds of like management boards and project steering groups and so on. that is kind of a metric for you to see if you are providing value.
But think about that in other industries, we have really easy sort of like measurement tools to say how well are we providing value, whether or not it's like improvement percentages or whether or not it's financial numbers or things like that. I love how yours is, am I invited into the rooms where it happens, which I think is kind of cool. And I want to turn it back to our audience here, because I'd love to have you think about your own experience with enterprise architecture. Does your organization have a practice around that? I'm sure something like that, but how have you seen that work, and has it been useful to you for improving your organization's ability to execute, defining and modeling, communicating how the company works, and where has it fallen short of your needs? We'll come back with our second section, a little bit more about how to make lightweight EA happen for you and your organization.
And welcome back. Eetu, very interesting high-level approach about how to do lightweight EA. It obviously comes with its benefits and its challenges, but obviously the question is now, how do you make this happen? What are things that you would recommend to our listeners, how they can implement EA as a lightweight layer? So to quote you get invited to the next party.
Yeah, in the best of cases.
You should start bringing cake and coffee. That makes you more
Oh
popular.
wait, hold up.
Yeah,
Hold on.
it helps muffins.
Are you thinking
or
we
something.
don't bribe people? We bribe people all the time, buddy.
Of course.
I have brought so much baked goods into boardrooms and war rooms to beg people to listen to me. It works.
It
It's
helps.
like way better
I-
than good modeling. Trust me.
Yeah, I'm just here. I'm just here for the cookies. What?
Yeah.
Why are you here, guys? No, but in all seriousness,
Oh boy.
Eetu, if you would take your junior consultant to the side, who's tasked with that, and you're the more experienced, wiser statesman, what would be the tips that you would give that young colleague?
I think it all starts like we are talking about collaboration and talking with management and such things, but you still need the architectural descriptions. Like you should have the like basic current state EA blueprints available, because otherwise I wouldn't say that you are even an architect. Like you should complete them in like good time, like not take a year to do it. You don't need so many of them, like 3, for example, and then like enrich them with attributes that are interesting to management, like criticality or cost or ownership risk, things like that, or performance, for example. And then while doing them, you talk with everyone, and then you present them and validate them with everyone. Like architect is the person who actually should talk with almost everyone in the organization. Like at least everyone who is on the same level, like kind of same logical level than they are.
And do you see all those different artifacts? So I try to visualize it right now, and I have to admit, I come from a family of real architects, the guys building houses. So I'm the black sheep in our family, But the one thing that I remember when I was little was like those big drawing desks, and my uncle was drawing big sheets of paper, and then he duplicated them in some stinky box in the basement and blah, So that was obviously pre-digital, but that was project by project, right? So he had his blueprint and all those other drawings that he did, calculations, whatever, and it went up in a file, right? A physical file, a drawer. That is not how I see EA today. At least I don't. What are your observations? Is it a project by project approach that you do this, or does it end everything in a big digital repository where things build up over time. And why is that good or is not good?
It depends what you are modeling. Like if you consider the current state, like that is a continuous activity, you have to keep it up to date. You have to
Mm-hmm.
have some kind of like governance calendar that you actually update it after every project that implements something, that you take those changes into account, and also do like quality control and delete duplicates and so on from the tool if you are using a real EA tool.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to target state, that is more like project work. For example, you should, to my opinion, you should do high level solution architecture blueprint for every project or initiative that somehow changes the enterprise architecture, because that is just smart to kind of scope what is happening and how it affects the architecture. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, you can do it on like more extensive scopes, like for example, an organizational function or even the whole organization. But then you need a lot of discussion with leadership to be able to do that, and maybe lower the kind of level of detail and have a very high level target state for the organization.
And in the target state, are you defining like the whole organization every time? Like, how do you make sure that, talking about lightweight EA, that you have enough detail and that you're not sort of boiling the ocean when you're describing how things are planned for what the future state looks like?
Yeah, for the organization level future state, I would have it very high level. For example, not identify every process and application, because then it is just too much work, and you wouldn't know what will be there really. Like I would generalize it a bit and make it a bit more abstract, but still show the like important things that are changing. For example, if there is like a shared CRM coming in the future, I would like kind of put those elements there that people see what is changing.
Yeah, there's a fine line to walk. I've seen customers who said, "Oh well, we bought this tool now, and now we have to spend a year or two and bring everything in before we even can get started." Right. On the other hand, I've seen the uh, customers who documented everything on a project level, and then they say, "Yeah, we did all that stuff. Just go to SharePoint," and then you look into a 6-year-old folder of a project, and you see some diagrams, and they have nothing to do with the current reality. So I think the challenge is, while you're doing your current work today, that you uh, bring it in, and once you've implemented it, you update is what I like to call enterprise baseline,
Mhm.
and keep that current. But the challenge is that people don't have budget for it. How do you make sure that you are able to keep the baseline up to date? What are your experiences on that?
I think it starts from the level of detail and the complexity of the meta model. Like for if you start from there, that you model everything, then of course it is like a lot of work to maintain. But if you take like five element types and add maybe the same amount of relation types, then
Hmm.
it might be doable with one person on the side of everything else that the architect does. Like it is
Mhm.
about simplicity.
And that simplicity also makes it easier, I would hope, to collaborate and scale outwards, because you're not having everyone have to learn a larger practice mechanism or methodology, and you have a more of a chance of reaching across the aisle to different departments or different sort of perspectives. Tell me about how collaboration is aided by a more lightweight approach, and what does good collaboration look like within an EA practice and between an EA practice and a larger set of stakeholders?
Yeah, it's a huge question, but anyway, like
I'm happy to ask huge questions. Listen, EA is about asking and answering huge questions, right? So let's
yeah,
do it here as well.
encompasses everything. But anyway, like it starts from when you start working on the EA diagrams. Like of course, then you start meeting the people and going through the diagrams with them, like getting the source data and then later validating them. Like then you will meet the people and will see what they know and what they are interested in, and then you can later answer to their needs better. So it is like a continuous process. Like you
Mhm.
create stuff with people, then you validate stuff with people, and then you try to utilize them and help the people to make better plans and decisions with your enterprise architecture diagrams. I think that's it on a very general level.
How's your experience on the acceptance? Obviously, when you do this the first time, the projects will say, yeah, Eetu, just do your thing, and since you're doing your thing good, they might like it, but then the project ends. What are your experiences with customers? And by that, I also mean the internal customers, the project teams and org units and all those guys. Uh, what are your experiences in accepting this? And do you see a demand for those artifacts, the contribution that architects bring to the table? Or is it more like, oh yeah, nicely played, well done, good job, and then you get moved on?
I think there is a huge difference between different stakeholders. For example, like usually I see that projects and programs are interested and
Mhm.
and even happy if you help them to make sense of the current complexity and kind of help them scope what they will do, and then they are able to do a better plan. And if you even do it for free to them, like you are just an architect resource provided
Oh,
by some other unit, then they
yeah,
are of
yeah.
course
Who,
happy.
yeah, who says no
Who,
to
who,
free work?
who wouldn't?
Yes.
And then there are also there can be these IT people, for example, like IT managers, and you provide them with applications and data flows, and then they are
Yeah,
crying with joy because they didn't have this view before, and now they can plan the transitions better, for example. But
yeah.
of course, there are then more challenging cases. Like for example, I have seen top leaders who think that enterprise architecture is management overhead, that you shouldn't do capability based planning, for example, because it's just extra work. Like do strategy as people usually do it, and don't mix architecture in it. Like it's a valid view, and it is
Yeah.
also about how the architect presents his or her case.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had the same experience on both sides of the spectrum. Um, but sometimes the opinion is, oh, the nerd was useful. So speaking of nerds, nerds all like tools. And I'm pretty sure there's a decent amount of, or a decent number of people in our audience who stumbled over the podcast because they thought, oh, I think that's interesting. Which tool do I need to buy? So what is your opinion on the usage of tools, and which tools in the context of your work?
Yeah, I like good tools, and I have used plenty of them, like the high end tools, but also the not so expensive ones and not so
Hmm.
complex ones. But like as I said before, like you should start light. But if you cannot choose, like then you use whatever tool is available in the organization as a consultant, I mean. But yeah, the tool is not everything that you always have to remember, and the tool doesn't automatically guarantee that the content is fine, and that
Hmm.
and even if the content is kind of fine, like that it stays good quality. So you need shared practices and quality control, even if you have a very good tool. Like you have to have the other processes in place, not only the tool.
What are your thoughts about one of two possibilities where you spend more of a time in a tool that you've selected that is fit for purpose, and you bring people to it to have conversations versus going to where people are and using the tool sets and practices that they've ingrained in their sort of their business unit and doing the kind of work that you do in their space?
Like when it comes to enterprise architecture, I
Yeah.
usually like to have a dedicated tool for that.
Okay.
Like it depends on the setting, what is the best option. Like if you want to start, like you can have teams for storing the stuff, then you can have have Excel for application attributes, and then you can have Archie for relationships, and PowerPoint maybe then for the leadership presentations. But if you have something repository based, like, then it is of course easier to have all kind of that, but then you need the budget as well.
Yeah, I just died a little bit inside, you know.
Well, and that's a question that you mentioned budget, E2, because I think this is something that a lot of people are really worried about, which is with all the perceived cost of the human effort of practices like this. Tell me about where you see EA going as we see more and more use of AI within organizations. So, how much does EA get augmented, replaced in some capacities? Where does AI fit a role in an EA practice?
Like, I think all of this is still good news for enterprise architects when it
All
comes to
right.
amount of work, because everything is getting more and more complex. But of course, like, so people need these diagrams and people who make sense of things. But of course, the enterprise architecture can and should then use AI to their benefit in it, like, and it can be used in many respects. For example, for creating data and analyzing, and for developing own work practices, for example, like in any knowledge profession.
Hmm.
I see it quite similar, but then of course you can have these nice AI integrations in tools that we are having in the high end ones.
Question back to you, Roland. I mean, I want us to get your perspective because I know you have divided thoughts on an AI,
Mhm.
particularly with AI AI accuracy in enterprise architecture. Have you seen AI models that know EA well, that have the capacity to advise on best practices and provide some sort of structural guidance?
No, I've seen that. I've seen that as helper tools. You know, in one
Mm,
software, for example, you import a list of things, and then the AI tries to figure out, is that an application or is that a component of an application,
mm,
right? So that a user just needs to check a box and say, okay, app or component. Um, there's obviously non-AI tools that you can run through networks and whatever, right? That then visualize this. Um, and I've seen some initial analysis attempts, which are more like statistical analysis. You know, think about JM, think about process mining. You know, in the tool that you and I know the best, where you say, "Oh, show me the anomalies in this process," and then it looks at it and says, "Oh, yeah, but this and this seems to be very loosely related or not related at all, or
mhm,
there's a spike of this thing over here." I have not seen that in um, IT architecture tools to that
mhm,
degree, right? So that might be a next uh, frontier, if you will, for those vendors to do that. But on the other side, I also seen tools like RDoc, for example, who for a very long time, until they bought a modeling tool, for a very long time said, no, 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 we don't model. You know, we have
mhm.
everything rendered based on the relationships in the database, right? So that might be good enough. That might be good enough for uh, getting some answers.
It seems like, E2, that you're talking about the need for a presentation layer. Like you've mentioned PowerPoint multiple times, which is something I don't necessarily see. I might say I see fledgling EA practices using PowerPoint, but you still see it as a valuable tool for executive presentation. Tell me about how this makes enterprise architecture more sticky in organizations and more sustainable in organizations.
I think it is more about the feature of the lightweight EA approach, like
Mm,
starting with Archie, and not a real high end EA tool that automatically would have these nice looking views. Like for example, I would model the enterprise architecture with Archie, and then have these diagrams that I would show to management, drawn with Visio, like redrawn and maintained separately, because it just looks better than these like Archimate
Mhm.
colored ones.
So
Yeah.
that implies to me that there's a this is a like a whole life cycle of work that you're doing to keep EA alive within organizations as they transform? I mean, one thing we've seen, particularly in the last, I've seen the last couple of years, is a lot of people leaving the practices, or a lot of organizations downsizing some of these, what you said before, these cost organizations, these management overhead business, like parts of the business. How do you keep EA alive within those organizations, and make sure that once again this practice is able to weather the storm of sort of downsizing, financial challenges, or sorts of things, to make the company successful despite any of the things that stand in their way?
I think the largest risk within EA practices is that it just like shuts down. Like no one is interested anymore, and it
Hmm.
just dies. Like even the architects are not so eager to work on it anymore. Like they are not persistent enough, for example. So there are many things you would need to be doing. Like for example, keep the models updated, because otherwise you don't have like anything as an architect except your own opinions, which may not always count for so much. And you would need to tie these enterprise architecture things, for example, utilizing and creating these descriptions to like real planning and governance forums that you already have in the organization, like portfolio reviews, strategy work, project quality gates, and so on, like IT management forums. There are many kinds of forums for decision making and planning where EA could add value, and you should try to kind of integrate it within those, because that's how it keeps alive. And of course, like I mentioned, this persistence, like it's a quality that is really needed in an enterprise architect. It doesn't work anymore. Like they would need to be a person who wants to like carve through the stone to keep the practice alive. And then like to keep it interesting and new for the architect as well, they should find new ways to utilize EA in the organization. For example, if they haven't gotten to the strategy tables yet, they should try it somehow. Like maybe through some other party that they know that could introduce them, for example, and maybe pilot it once and try if it sticks.
Well, it's interesting because it's a little bit depressing when you say that even the architects give up, right? So because
Yeah,
that that
it might happen if no one believes in them and is not interested.
Uh,
then the question is there a product market mismatch? You know, is what they produce just not of interest, right? So does it mean that architecture needs to elevate itself? You know, and I'm asking into the open void here because I don't have an answer for this, you know. But how do you make it more attractive? Right? If the opinion is that, well, that nice diagram that you drew, that's all fine and dandy, but I don't have a need for it. Right? What would be your thoughts on whatever doing an enterprise 2.0 or EA 2.0 approach?
Like I think making it light is like one part of it, because then you at least save money and
Hmm.
and produce the same benefits, to my opinion, than with this like full-fledged framework based heavy approach that no one might be interested in.
Me too. Just to jump in here, and Roland, you and I have seen the same thing. I'm sure at a couple of organizations is mandate-based sustainment. That's not really sustainable. It's
Hmm.
sustainable as long as the leader's there, but a lot of people are like, hey, listen, as long as it's like a required part of like a quality gate, as you mentioned that before, for a project, to have the architecture laid out and have the architecture team have contributed to this and signed off on it, like you get to win by default. But boy, that's really, really temporary, because
Hmm.
what's the average tenure of a senior executive, right? It's 18 months. Good luck trying to build a practice off of every 18 months having to resell your existence to a new mandate generator. And how many of them want to create a mandate on day one? So you'll always have this like ongoing risk of, in the ebb and flow of leadership, am I going to find myself in a downswing during an economic downturn, and then bye, EA is no longer a thing. Uh,
I think is a challenge because, and I think the discipline is struggling with that for 40 years or
mm,
how long, for decades, because the outcomes are not well defined,
mhm,
right? So when you think about it, you have process management, right? And you do an analysis, process mining, whatever, right? By hand, Gemba. Um, you measure things. And there's a reason why our podcast is called What's Your Baseline? Because you want to show the improvement compared to your baseline.
mhm.
Um, that's easy. Oh, I cut so and so many people. I lower the cost. I increase the capacity. I improve time. I whatever, be more compliant. I have the best customer experience. My quality is awesome. Whatever the criteria is, that's super straightforward, right? How do you do that for EA? I have conversations with uh, a shared friend of ours, JM, and his head blows up when I use the word capability, right?
Yeah.
And he says, capabilities are useless, blah. And I said, okay, let's agree on this is the box, the shoe cardboard box where I put a little bit of blue tape on it and write a word on it, But we agree that the content that you put in is the important things, not the box itself,
But
right?
Roland, one
But
of the things I've
mm,
also seen here is that you can key this. I don't want to push back to E2 here. You can key some of this off of risk and governance, risk and compliance, or risk management, or regulatory obligations. So tell me, when you're keeping EA alive, do you ever key it into the threats that are facing the organization, and particularly like a regulatory obligation that they have to do EA?
I think there are like multiple angles. Of course there might be this compliance one. Like I use it if it is relevant, but it is kind of an added bonus to like rationalizing the
Hmm.
EA approach. But usually it is better to start from something else, like real challenges the organization is facing, and even better if they are like challenges of some specific leader in the organization, because then you can be kind of an internal consultant to them and try to provide added value with EA if you
Huh.
can. Like you always, it doesn't always happen. Like you cannot provide value with EA to anything, but if it's a certain kind of problem, then it might work. And then there are these best practices, like in general, you should introduce EA on some level in complex initiatives because it is just smart.
I like that. Well, that's a good point to turn it back to our audience here. How have you seen people be convinced that EA is an important practice to build or to sustain? What sort of quality and success metrics have you seen introduced? And how have you proven that EA was still relevant for the organization and working? And how might you make EA a little bit more lightweight so that its transportability, its ease of use, make it more appetizing to leadership or to new leadership coming in? We'll come back with our final section after the break and our final thoughts and conclusions for this show.
and welcome back. Thanks for that very interesting conversation, Eetu. It's really a challenge getting EA off the ground, getting EA implemented and accepted in organizations. And I think our conversation is a little step forward, to make it a little bit less threatening for stakeholders to see this. And I think you have a good approach, a lightweight approach, to stick with the theme of our episode, a lightweight approach to bring things to life. The question that comes up, and I showed it in the camera. My phone is somewhere else now. I know you wrote books. You mentioned it. What you didn't say is obviously I, for example, am not a Finnish native speaker. I was hoping for an English version of your book, which obviously exists, but you didn't say when it comes out. When does your book come out in English?
It actually comes out tomorrow. That is the 14th of
Oh,
October. So it is exciting times.
So it
Congratulations.
Thank
it
you.
has been published already, because we're
Yeah.
obviously in the future now. So no, that's good. And I wish you all the best. It's very satisfying, but after the games, before the game, so the marketing starts. Um, the other thing is, I know you're writing also on other places about EA, and maybe a correlated question to that is, if someone listens to this, how can people reach you? So 2 questions on your writings and your contact information.
I think if you want to see an example of my content, you should head to my Substack, which is called Enterprise Architecture Transformation. Like I publish a new article every week, and they are all about EA and related topics. So you're welcome to get to know them. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach on a more personal level, like drop me a message or connection request.
Yeah, we definitely will put the links into the show notes, so that you don't have to take notes while driving.
And that's a good pitch for the show notes, Roland. And a pitch back to our audience to join us online. Yes, we are online and we are excited to see you. So thank you so much for coming along with us on this ride. It's been a lot of fun. Roland, my goodness, this was a great episode to sort of get us started after our 100th special, which is one that just came out last a couple of weeks ago, which is really great. And for those of you who've been following along this whole time, thank you so much for helping us get there and for keeping us going. So we love to get your emails at hello@whatsyourbaseline.com. Visit whatsyourbaseline.com. Visit us on LinkedIn. Leave comments, leave likes, share with your friends. We'd love to hear from you and help to build the next 100 episodes of What's Your Baseline. But until then, my friends, I've been J.M. Erlandson.
And I have been Eetu Niemi.
And my name is still Roland Wold.
And we will see you in the next one.